and then I'll go ahead and start.
Okay, it's preparing to live stream right now.
So it just pops up on the main page, correct?
Yes. You're all set.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kentucky Hands and Voices tonight. And we're so excited to be here. It's the DHH Hero Power Hour. And we're really excited to have our special guest tonight, Emma Riley and Shelby White. I'm your moderator tonight, Donna Carpenter, with the Kentucky Deafblind Project. And we're so happy you joined us tonight. So why don't we get started, and we're gonna let Emma and Shelby introduce themselves. And then can you share your hero name also and why you chose that to be your hero name? And we'll go ahead and start with Emma.
All right. Thank you, Donna. As Donna said, I am Emma, and my sign name is like this. I am from Bergen, Kentucky. It's about not far from Danville, north of Danville. I identify as deaf-blind, and I work for the Kentucky Department of Education. This is my 6th year working for the KDE. And I am with the special ed department, and my focus is transition age. I do have 2 children, 2 boys, a 2.5-year-old and a 7-month-old. And I also have 4 dogs. You may think I'm insane, but yes, I do have 4 dogs. One of them is my guide dog, Lucy. My superhero name is the Blooming Lotus. And the reason I picked the blooming lotus is because it is a flower that tends to bloom when you care for it and the sun looks at it. Well, most flowers do, but the blooming lotus can grow in the most challenging of conditions. So that describes me, because I have been through many challenges in my life, and with my resiliency, I have been able to be successful. I turn it over to Shelby.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shelby. I actually just had a change of last name. My last name is now Redmond because I just got married in May. I'm from Lexington, but I now live in Richmond, Kentucky. I go to EKU, and I am in the field of education for deaf and hard of hearing, as well as an elementary education. I have 3 dogs. I'm currently pregnant. I have a baby on the way. One of my dogs is a retired service dog. They don't guide me, but they do like hearing and that sort of thing. So if there's any noises I can't hear or something, they notify me of that. So I've had them through college. This is my 2nd career or 2nd major in college. Prior to that, I went to Moorhead State, and my major there was for vet tech. I graduated from that program, and then after working for a while, I decided to go back to school. My superhero name is Sunshine. The reason I chose that superhero name is because one of my best friends growing up always used to call me that name. It was a nickname I had from them. And so, yeah, it was Sunshine. And I guess that was because I was always offering to help people and trying to encourage other people and shine a light on them. So that's my sign name, or my superhero name, rather.
This is Donna. So I just want to say, if we put Emma and Shelby in the same room with their dogs, we'd have a lot of dogs there. So, no, we would all be happy, Shelby, if that was happening.
Yeah, we'd have to
Oh.
wait.
So I'm going to go ahead and start with some questions. I'm sure maybe some family members would like to know. Can you both share a little bit about when you were first identified, or I guess your families found out that you were deaf-blind, and maybe share a little bit about how your family responded to that, and so we can share with our families. Let's go ahead and start with Shelby this time.
Sure. I found out I was deaf at the age of 4. Well, really at that time I was hard of hearing. I progressively lost my hearing, but I became completely deaf at around the age, I guess 5th grade-ish. So I didn't find out I was blind yet at that time. The doctor actually didn't know why I was deaf. We never really tested for any other reasons or causes. So until about, I would say I was around 20 or 21, when I was in college, I just had gone to the eye doctor and everything seemed fine, but it seemed like there was something wrong with my right eye. So they sent me to a specialist and they suspected that something else was wrong. So they sent me to another specialist and they did very specific tests and did a blood test and found out that yes, I had an Usher syndrome. So I've just started to identify as deafblind, maybe within the last 2 or 3 years. I've met other deafblind friends who really encouraged my journey and encouraged me to really do that self-discovery. Like when it comes to my family, you know, they've grown up with me being deaf, of course, but the blindness is new to them.
This is Donna. Shelby, can I ask you, you mentioned Usher syndrome. Can you share with everyone what that is?
Sure. Usher syndrome is, so this is a sign for it, Usher syndrome, really is a progressive and genetic
Recessive.
a recessive gene that happens from both parents and that's passed down. And I guess there's at least 4 different types of Usher syndrome that one can have. So one could have that be deafblind when they're young. Then you see that happen during adolescence, like the teen years, as well as then in adulthood. There's a few different types. There's also the type where it's a little bit more rare, where one is more deaf or more blind. And so you'll see different impacts of that later. Some research that I've seen, they have some finding that with adults, a lot of times they won't know that they have it because maybe they don't recognize that they've had this vision issue, or maybe they don't find out that they're deaf until later. And so that impacts that. And then like with mine, like when maybe Emma could add, because I'm still quite new to this and learning about it. So maybe Emma could add in a little bit more about what Usher syndrome is.
Sure. The way you described it was a great explanation. Where I'll start is my identification process, and then I'll add on to what you've commented about Usher syndrome, Shelby. My mother, I was around a year old when my mother knew I was having some issues with my hearing, but they did not actually find out that I had Usher syndrome until I was 6. When I went to the eye doctor at 6, they made the comment of having salt and pepper like features in my retina. And luckily, I was identified early, so I was able to be sent to a specialist. At 6, of course, my mother went through a grieving process once the diagnosis had been shared with her. And I'm sure that there's parents out there that have the same experiences. Did I know that I had Usher syndrome at the age of 6? No, my mother didn't share with me until I was 11 years old, and she had her reasons, and I understood, you know, because at 6, are you really mature enough to handle that type of information? So at that time, I had already grown into my identity as being deaf. I went to the school for the deaf, but my mother actually, and myself actually realized that I was struggling with my vision. Once the word blind was shared with me, it was a scary experience because I didn't know what to expect. The word, yeah, I had to go through a grieving process of my own once I realized that I would progressively lose my vision as time went on. Of course, I had to think about what type of future would I have, but I went on and was able to accept accept where I was with my vision and my hearing loss. And within the last 6 or 7 years, I have now been identifying as deaf blind. And like Shelby has said, there's different types of Usher syndrome, and they affect the hearing and the vision in different ways, and balance as well. And I do struggle with my balance. Each individual, it affects them differently. I am profoundly deaf, and my vision loss, I have been losing my vision since I was a little girl.
This is Donna. So both of you have used the word deaf blind, and I know for parents, sometimes that can be a very scary word. And you both mentioned identifying as deaf blind. Can you share a little bit more about that? Because I know, Emma, when you came on, you said you identify as deaf blind, and Shelby, you shared that you're still on that journey. So Emma, can you start and just answer a little bit about why you use that word identify as deaf blind?
Sure. I identify as deafblind for several reasons. And one is so I don't have to explain constantly how much I can hear or how much vision I do have. And if I use the terminology Usher syndrome, many people may not understand what comes with that diagnosis, and it's a medical diagnosis. So I don't want to have to go through the explanation process. So in my journey, as I became more confident in who I am, I realized that identifying as deaf-blind actually served a purpose of role modeling to others. And it's easier for me to make connections with other people. It shows my confidence in myself and how I can be an advocate for myself and the needs that I may have. It's like showing, when I say that I identify as deaf-blind, it's letting people know that I'm okay with where I'm at in life and I can advocate for myself.
This is Donna. Thanks, Emma. Shelby, do you want to add to that?
So sure. For me, it's still a journey because, you know, I wasn't diagnosed until like the last 5 or 6 years. So also I just met someone in the community who can help me. Like, yes, I know Emma, I've met her growing up and things like that, but I really didn't have somebody close to me yet. And so when I've met someone who they themselves are a bit more social, they've been able to help me more with that identity and journey. So I do identify myself now as deafblind, but some people still are a little like trying to figure out that acceptance of me, right? Because I grew up deaf, right? Everybody who knows me knows that I'm deaf. And that's how they would identify me as deaf. So to change that label and that identity, not only for myself, but for other people too, it can be a little bit of a struggle. I also kind of teeter back and forth on that because I do have vision issues, but like, and I'm not saying like other people look down on me, but I'm like, I don't always feel like enough, right? Like, because it's like, well, now I can't drive as much or feel not as independent, or if I don't have that vision, that's really requesting different accommodations and things like that. But that identification of myself means, interpreters are automatic. Like I have to make sure that communication is facilitated and that other people recognize that. I feel like they recognize that term deafblind much faster than Usher syndrome. I agree. I think that just shows like more self-confidence, more awareness of myself. Like, hey, I am going to need accommodations around a couple different things. I think it also helps me with that.
Emma?
Do you mind if I add
Sure.
2 things? What I noticed growing up before I actually identified myself as being deaf-blind. I would keep that information to myself. It really impacted my mental health. One example is if I bumped into something and the person was clueless of my vision struggles, or because my disability is one that's considered invisible, they may view me in a different light. I know that it didn't really tie back to the question you asked, but that was a big challenge for me when people didn't realize that I was deafblind. My family and the people I grew up with, because my vision did change as I grew up, and their view of me was only being deaf, but I actually was struggling with my vision as well. And it's, I was the one that was experiencing the change while everybody around me was the same. So it was important for me to let them know about my changes.
This is Donna. Thanks, Emma and Shelby. So I almost forgot that we're live on Facebook and we get some questions from our audience members. So one just popped up here and it's from a family, and they said, what advice or encouragement would you give a parent who has just learned that their child has Usher syndrome? Okay, why don't we start with Shelby?
If they're under the age of 18, I'm actually going to defer to Emma because she has more experience with that. Of course, since I was older, I wasn't really a kid anymore, but I would maybe say one thing is that, yes, it is a process. It's definitely a journey. It can be scary, but just take it one step at a time, one thing at a time, and it'll all work out.
Okay, the advice I would give. Well, I have a few things. Make sure your expectations are high. Yes, the future, when you think about your child's future, it may be scary, but those expectations need to be high so that child can meet those expectations and learn and grow and excel and get the resources and places so that child can learn and excel and grow. Instill that self-advocacy part of it as well as that child grows. communication is so vital. Whatever communication modality you choose, make sure that they are just able to express themselves, their feelings and their needs. And don't forget about your mental health and your child's mental health. When a child is being diagnosed as deaf blind and having to take that journey, it's very easy to become isolated. So yes, the education piece of it is very important, but the social is just important as well.
Shelby, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I know that it can be scary to hear that term deaf blind, but also deaf blind people can still do many things. They can have friends, they can, rock climb, they can swim, they can be part of a team, they can run. There's so many things that they can do. I mean, they can be in sports. So we just have to make some accommodations and adjust a little bit, but they can do everything with, it's not a problem. They can do it.
This is Donna. So Shelby and Emma, I'm going to lead off what Shelby was just talking about. What are some of your hobbies or things you like to do? Emma, you want to start?
Hobbies. I need some, really. I like to be outdoors. I love the outdoors. I like to get my hands dirty, be out at landscaping, out mowing the yard. I just love to be outdoors. I also like crafts because, again, that's very hands-on, and I just love making things and creating things. And I also like to spend time with my family and my children and my dogs. I really enjoy that family time. Growing up, I was a reader. That's one thing I do miss now. I'm not reading as much, and I would love to get back into that.
This is Donna. Emma, you forgot to add that you love to run, because I've seen you run on a treadmill.
I do not like to run. Exercise, but yeah, running, no, not my thing.
Shelby, how about you? Some hobbies that you like or things that you enjoy?
I enjoy reading, watching movies, hanging out with family and friends, and spending time with the dogs, of course. I love animals. I love being outside in nature. As far as like mowing and gardening and all that stuff, that is not my thing. I like being out in nature, sure, and sit with a tree, that's fine, but like doing yard work, no thank you. So I love horseback riding. I really miss that. Swimming is one of my favorite things. So yeah.
Oh, those are all great things. So for our families that are watching and may want to know, what was your education like? I know you both have graduated from college, but where did you go to school when you were younger? We'll start with, we'll go with Shelby first.
Right. As I mentioned, when I was little, I grew up in Lexington. So I went to an elementary school called Rosa Parks Elementary. It's kind of like a really nice, big elementary school. They had about, I would say maybe like 10 or 12 deaf students ranging from kindergarten to 5th grade. So we kind of went through it as a group at that time. Then for middle school, I went to Beaumont Middle School. And again, it was just a little bit smaller at the size. I would say there was maybe like 8 to 10 deaf students that went through. And hard of hearing too, I'm counting hard of hearing in that. And then I went to the Paul Dunbar High School,
Mhm.
and I graduated from high school there. And there were much less deaf kids at that time than during at least my time there. There were maybe 5 or 6 of us. I also forgot to mention that for preschool, I went to the Lexington Hearing Speech Center. So that's where I really started, with my deaf and hard of hearing journey was there. So that's what I did.
Thanks, Shelby. How about you, Emma?
So I am not from Kentucky. I am a native of West Virginia. I did go to public school. They had a deaf cluster. I also went to the mainstream classroom as well. And like I said, it wasn't until I was 6 years old when my mother found out I had ushers. So she looked into the services that West Virginia could provide and wasn't satisfied with what they could provide. So we decided to move to Kentucky. And I went to the Kentucky School for the Deaf, starting at 2nd grade and went all the way through till graduation. I did go out to the public schools and take classes there at the public schools. My freshman year, I went to RIT, Rochester Institute. I was there for a year. I was not feeling the cold weather. So I came back and went to University of Kentucky and finished my bachelor's degree in psychology. I'm currently thinking about my master's. In what field, I have no clue.
Shelby.
Oh, I did forget to add and mention there for preschool. Yeah, I don't obviously remember that. Honestly, I don't remember anything about that except for the fact that I went and I had some friends there. Then for elementary school, for K through 3rd grade, I was pulled from the class to go to deaf and hard of hearing classroom as well as speech therapy. And I think it was just those 2 things. So I went back and forth between the general ed classroom. That's where I spent most of my time. And then sometimes I would be pulled out for 4th grade and 5th grade. I started not going to the DHH room as much, maybe just like an hour. I didn't really need as much time there. It was only maybe an hour a day or so. Just really depended on my needs at that time. And then I also had speech therapy through that. For middle school, I typically didn't go to the deaf and hard of hearing room. Typically the deaf and hard of hearing teacher came to my classroom, and because I needed some extra help like with English and stuff. And so they would come to some of my classes. And I still had speech therapy through that time. I did go to a deaf and hard of hearing room if needed, like maybe just a mental break, or I needed extra help or was struggling with something, then I could be pulled out for that if needed. In high school, really the only time I went to the deaf and hard of hearing room was for a special event or maybe in the morning and afternoon. A lot of times they would just come to my room, and I stopped speech therapy after middle school. I did have an interpreter the whole time. It wasn't just the same one the whole time. I mean, I had some changes throughout the years, but I had an interpreter provided to me through my K-12 education.
Okay, this is Donna. So let's talk a little bit about communication. Can you all share how you communicated with your family and friends growing up and how you communicate with your family and friends now? Emma, we'll start with you.
Sure. When I was first identified as deaf, my mother immediately started learning sign language, not American Sign Language. She did start with C, Signed Exact English. And then once I was placed into KSD, we both became fluent in American Sign Language. My mother is the only person in my family that signs. There's a few other family members that know a little bit of sign language, but it's mostly my mother. So I used ASL growing up until a few years ago. And when I noticed my vision was progressively getting worse and I was going through my journey, I picked up other modalities. I am using American Sign Language, and I do use tactile signing. And that's basically when I place my hand over the signer so I can feel the sign. When I first started that, it was a new experience because of the hand memory that I had to develop. I've been doing it for the last 6 or 7 years, and I am still not an expert at it. I'm still learning, and it is a challenge. I do better with people that I've have a lot of experience with, and it takes me a moment if it's a new signer that I'm tactiling with because I have to learn their style. My significant other, we've been together for 9 years. He can hear. He is sighted. He didn't know sign when we started dating, and I taught him through our relationship, and he now does sign with me and use tactile signing. And we've also introduced pro-tactile, and with pro-tactile, it's presenting information in different touch ways. Like this is an example. If someone is laughing, he can let me know by giving me a signal on my arm. If it's a no, it's a signal on my arm. So it's extra environmental information. My 2-year-old, he's learning sign and spoken English. And it's very interesting because he watches me and his father communicate and he mimics what we do. And it's so very precious.
Mhm. Thanks, Emma. Shelby, you want to add?
Sure. As I was growing up, I kind of had the same thing as Emma. I started learning signed exact English first, and then later changed to, well, tried ASL. And I went back to more of like a PSE, a pigeon signed English, but signed exact English was my first thing. And then my mom and my stepdad, well, who I call dad, really tried to learn and picked up sign as well. It wasn't, I mean, they can sign, but it's not really fluid. But my family's picked it up along the way. I do use a lot of lip reading and speech. I did grow up using hearing aids, and I tried to do, like use the hearing aids. But one thing is that with the lip reading and everything, people will ask me like, well, how, did you teach yourself to do that? How did you teach yourself speech and learn and all that stuff? And it was like, I don't even remember learning it. I just did. And I don't remember how I did it. I just did. So it's kind of funny. So I grew up with some friends who could hear, and I also had some deaf friends. But some of my friends who would speak, they picked up some sign, yes. But of course, with my deaf friends, I signed. And I could just kind of match whatever their style was the best I could. Now, it's pretty much the same thing, but I have to match my vision, right? So like I need a black screen behind somebody. I can't have a lot of sun, those sorts of logistical things. The shirt has to be a certain type of color, it has to match. And so really, somebody cannot be too far distance from me. I still also have some peripheral vision. So if somebody comes up to me, I really often don't know they're there because I have lost a lot of that. So they have to tell me if they're there. My family is still learning about all that. I just started my journey, as I've mentioned. So with the tactile itself, I haven't started doing that. I've just learned it for fun because I'm sure I'm going to use it in the future, but I am really struggling with it. It is not easy, especially if you grew up with it, it'd be easier, but it is not easy to learn. I have a friend who I've hung out with, or actually that one friend who has helped me on my journey. And we've used tactile with them as well as pro-tactile. And I'm learning kind of with them. And so it's kind of nice to be able to use other people and be able to use that with people who might need it. So my husband can hear, but he did not know sign before me and meeting me. He learned when he met me. He is good with making sure that I'm, paying attention, that I'm looking where I need to look. And I also forgot to mention before, I had a hearing aid, but the hearing aids did not work for me. So I got a cochlear implant. I decided that on my own to get a cochlear implant because of my Usher syndrome and for some other reasons.
Thanks, Shelby. So we have another question from our audience. And the question is, what challenges do you guys face as a deafblind person? And are there any websites or resources for people who are curious about this journey to learn more? Shelby, I see you shaking your head, so I'm going to let you go first.
Two things. First of all, challenges. A challenge is like just figuring out what as a deaf blind person, what I need, because I didn't grow up with those types of accommodations for my vision. I grew up deaf. And so like, I knew what I needed for that. I knew we needed an interpreter for whatever situations or, what types of things I might need. But now with the vision, that's also kind of changing things. And it's sometimes day to day, week to week, or dependent on the situation. So I'm still learning about that. It's challenging, of course, for me to see people, to get accommodations that I need sometimes. And for some situations, people really don't understand and they're not aware. Driving, I can a little bit, I notice I can still, but there are some situations where I can tell that I'm losing my vision more and more. I'm still safe. I make sure I'm safe when I do drive. So I think I should add that in there, but that can be a challenge. I think what might be most challenging are the interpersonal things, right? Those things that, myself is changing. So, and then also, I really don't have a lot of resources. I just am involved in the community. Yeah, I guess that's my resources of the community. So, Emma?
Emma, go ahead. Yep.
Donna, a quick question for you. Could you repeat the second part of the question, please?
Sure. Let me pull it up over here on my little phone over here where everything pops up for questions. So the first part is asking about your challenges. And the second part is asking about maybe resources for people to go and learn more.
Okay, great. Thank you. Challenges. Whew. My challenge would not be what people would actually envision, because people envision, the lack of independence, but I don't see that as a challenge for me. I am independent, have a job and what have you. But like Shelby mentioned, that intrapersonal part is a challenge for me. Being able to see things. And as I lose my vision, it's a grieving process for me, because then I start thinking about, will I be able to see my child graduate? Another challenge is just letting others know how to communicate with me and that they can actually communicate with me. I know that people want to learn, and people don't have bad intentions, but they sometimes say things that can be hurtful or make it even more difficult and frustrating for me. Another challenge is related to my blindness. As I lost my vision, my anxiety was on the rise, because I used to be a very social person, get out and meet people. I was the one that got out and played with the kids and did things. But now I get a little anxious when I do have to go to new places because I have to take on extra considerations. Will I know where the bathroom is at? Will the floor not have any obstacles that I have to get around? So I think that that increases that effect at my anxiety level.
Mhm. And Emma, this is Donna. Do you have any resources or places that people might go to get more information?
Resources. I completely forgot. I was obsessing on the challenges. Okay, so resources. I really think it depends on the age group. If you're in Kentucky and they're under 22, of course, you have the Deaf Blind Project. Even if your child may not have a significant loss with their vision or their hearing, still get in touch with them and take advantage of the resources they offer. Of course, Hands and Voices. And then the state of Kentucky has the Kentucky School for the Deaf and Kentucky School for the Blind. It doesn't mean you have to send your children there, but they are a vast place for knowledge and just resources. And once the child graduates, seek other programs that help with that transition. There are out-of-state programs, the Helen Keller National Institute, they provide different trainings. Braille is one of them. And then there's a training in Oregon for tactile, it's called tactile communication. Their focus is on pro-tactile, teaching pro-tactile and navigation. So those are a few resources I have.
Thanks, Emma. This is Donna. So one of the other questions we just got from one of our viewers is, can you both share a little bit about, I know Emma, you have a guide dog, Lucy, and then Shelby, you can share, I think it's a hearing dog. Is that right, Shelby? Your hearing dog. So just share maybe the process of how you got to having a dog and when do you use your dog? So I'll go ahead and start. Emma, you want to share about Lucy?
Sure. I've used guide dogs, well, a sighted for a dog for vision. I have a black lab, Lucy. We are very close because she is always with me. A guide dog is different than a service dog because a guide dog is provided free to any blind person that qualifies. The process, I went to a conference back in 2017. I went to a regional conference and it just so happened there was a booth there. And the booth was Leader Dogs for the Blind. And I met a guy and he had a dog with him. And he offered me to take a walk with his dog. And I said, sure. I was already a dog person. I was in the process of considering getting a guide dog, but I didn't know when I would actually do that. So we took a walk and the experience was very different than using a cane, and I enjoyed it. So let me back up. Now, Leader Dog, let me explain a little bit about Leader Dog. That is a guide dog school in Michigan. They have several schools all over the nation, but this one actually has a deaf blind program and they use ASL. So I actually went through the process of the application process, and I had to provide paperwork that proved my vision loss and my hearing loss, and I had to send a recording. Well, we had an interview because the purpose of the interview is they want to choose the dog that fits your specific lifestyle. So they let me know that they found a match for me. They did not give me any details. I was anxiously waiting like it was Christmas. And When I did get Lucy, it was a game changer. I use her when I go out to work, when I go out to do anything fun, any activity I experience daily, she is with me. She makes sure I get to the bathroom safely. I don't bump into people or trip over anything. So yes, she alerts me to obstacles and just really guides me.
Thanks, Emma, for sharing about Lucy. I have to admit, there's been a few times that Lucy has ridden in my car, and I'm so happy when she does that because she's off work and I can pet her. So I've enjoyed that very much. Shelby, let's share about your dog.
Sure. My dog is not really a traditional dog. It's not been trained in a traditional way. So what happened is I wanted a dog, but I wanted one that I could train myself, just with a specific agency. But there was a group of friends who went to the Humane Society and picked a dog for me. And so they were able to pick one for me, but they wanted to make sure that the dog had certain types of things and that I would need from a dog. So before I picked that dog, and I really did approve it. It wasn't like it was just like, oh, okay, well, here you go. Here's your new dog. No, that wasn't the case. I had to, of course, approve that. But she was only 3 months old at the time that I got her. So it was more for just like social training, like informational things. And then later, we kind of changed to more of a service dog training. Part of her training has been like while I was working her at my school. And so I got her because I was going to Moorhead State, and there's not a lot of deaf people there. There's, not a lot of familiarity and awareness of deaf people and ASL there. So I knew that when I went there, I would need someone with me to help me and to nudge me if there was like noise, or if, and I didn't understand at that time really that the hearing aids that I had, I thought they were good enough, but they really weren't great. And I didn't have a cochlear implant at that time. So she's named Hope. She's a Beagle Lab mix. She's black with white little paws and on the front of her chest, and she's getting a little old and gray. So she has a little white on her, and she is in my superhero picture with me on my trading card. So you can see her in the picture. Right now, she's essentially retired because recently she's had some issues with her hip. It's kind of a lab thing, so you'll see that happen. Plus she started young, so she's kind of retired a little earlier than maybe what typically you would see for an age for a service dog. So that's been the process with her. She's with me every day, everywhere, except for maybe just a few things. Like if I go on vacation, I often decide not to bring her because it's hard to, I guess, find accommodations for dogs everywhere. Not everywhere has that available yet. And of course, now we're seeing improvements, but over time, it has not always been a thing. Plus, I'm not super familiar with how to advocate for myself to make sure that I can tell people like, no, don't touch, she's working, or like to confront people or even address people who ask questions and all that. I don't feel like I have enough awareness to like find that type of resource to travel with her and that type of thing. I did mention like it wasn't like a traditional training or anything, and in terms of a service dog, the process is a little bit different than the guide dog process. So there's two ways that you can get a service dog. One of which is for the first way is very similar to the guide dog process. They'll give you like essentially a free dog. You might have to pay a deposit, with your form that you submit. You don't necessarily pay for the dog. It's just like a holding fee. And then you have to give a history for 2 or 3 years. They train the dog, that sort of thing. So it's very similar to the process for the guide dog. Then there's also where you get a dog earlier and you socialize them, and they're a bit more involved, and you are involved with the process, but that costs money. And typically the agencies that do that have some sponsorship type of programs that can help you save some money, earn money for that. So that's another route that somebody can take, and with a service dog and with those service dog agencies.
Thanks, Shelby. So I want to let both Emma and Shelby know we have about 8 minutes left. I have a few questions. Time has gone by really quick. But back to your dogs, have either of you flown with your dog or traveled with your dog? Can you share any information about that? Emma?
Sure. I have flown with Lucy a few times now. We've flown to trainings or flew to trainings, and we've traveled by car, by train, by Uber. I've traveled, have taken many modes of transportation with Lucy.
Thanks, Emma. How about you, Shelby?
I've never flown with my dog because, like I said, I'm just not as familiar with that type of situation, and I don't think that she is. And so I just leave her home if I fly. If I travel with her in the car, that's about the only place that we'll go. We might go down to Tennessee, stay a month there. I'll take her with me for that. That experience has been interesting when she's done that. But yeah, she goes in the car with me everywhere, but outside of that, not so much.
Thank you. That's great to hear about that. For anyone who's watching, could either of you share, or both of you share, maybe some deafblind etiquette, how maybe to get your attention, best way to communicate if, suppose it's a hearing person who doesn't know any signs. What would you guys suggest to share with everyone? Emma?
Sure. A few things I could share, a few tips I could throw out there. Use darker clothing if you can, especially the shirt, because if it's has a lot of patterns, it could interrupt the vision process. And plus, if you're signing, the contrast makes it easier to see your signs, and make sure that the environment, the lighting fits the individual person. I need a specific type of lighting, and not everybody may need that. So you may want to ask the person, is the lighting suitable for your needs? Or the person may be able to advocate on their own behalf when it's not. And it's very important. And this is one of the things that annoy me, clutter. Please try not to have so much clutter in your area, because we do have to navigate, and some things are out of sight. So they create a hazard for us. And if you do have your things positioned in a certain way to keep them, try to keep it that way. But if you move it, make sure you inform the person. How you would get their attention is softly patting on the shoulder, and then leave your hand there so until the person can track where you're at. Those traditional ways of like flashing the light or waving your hand, that lets me know someone is trying to get my attention, but I don't know where you're at. So with that touch, I would know where to look. Now, if we're in a vehicle and you see something cool and you point over at it and say, look, 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 it's not, it may take me a while to get to see that. So I may need a description of that, like a mailbox, a really cool mailbox, tell me it was pink and glittery or what have you. Give those details.
Thanks, Emma. How about you, Shelby? Any good advice you can share?
I think a lot of what Emma said is spot on. The shirt thing is very important. Where you stand is also important. Some deafblind people still have some vision, like for me, for instance. So where if you were standing in front of me, that's great. If you stood to the side of me, I would not feel as comfortable, like looking, I might miss you, that sort of thing. Like this kind of conversation, for instance, there's several people, so I need to have time to track to know where to look to see who's talking next. Otherwise I look too late and I might miss something, or I might miss the whole thing. It's safe to assume that you can like touch is best, usually on the shoulder. Some people, like I said, can still see, so you can kind of wave in front of them, but it's just safer to assume to tap them, especially if you don't know that person. This is not for me personally, but for some deafblind people who are fully blind or maybe only have a very slight amount of vision, who might use tactile, you might have to touch them and then wait for them to get your hand. So, and you have to identify yourself. They don't know you from the touch of your hand. So you have to say who you are. So identification is really important, saying like, hey, it's me, it's whatever. So that way you can carry on a conversation.
Well, we're getting to the end of our hour, and I want to thank both Emma and Shelby for spending this hour with us. Emma did mention the Kentucky Deafblind Project. Just so our viewers know, if you know a child or have a child that has a combined vision and hearing loss, anywhere from 0 to 22, you can contact the Kentucky Deafblind Project. And if you don't live in Kentucky, every state has their own deafblind project. So you can contact them, and they're a great resource for you all, both families and school teams and community. And really the easiest way to find them, just Google them. You can put in Kentucky Deafblind Project and we'll come up. We're at the University of Kentucky, and we would love to get in contact with you. So we have about 1 minute left, and Emma and Shelby, if there's any last remarks you want to share with our viewers. Shelby, we'll go with you first this time.
Yeah, I just want to mention that if anyone has questions, anyone can reach out to me, feel free. And how to best do that is to contact Hands and Voices first. You can reach out to them and they can refer you to me. I do not mind. I'm an open book. I'm happy to help and answer what questions you might have.
Thanks, Shelby. How about you, Emma?
And I just want to piggyback off what Shelby just said. Please contact me if you have any questions after this hour. And don't forget to look for your supports out there. Look for those other parents that may be experiencing the same thing you are.
All right, we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a terrific Thursday evening. I know I'm going to go sit on my couch and put my feet up, and I hope Emma and Shelby get to do that with their dogs also.